The 1920s was a decade marked by rapid cultural change, technological advances, and shifting social values that challenged long-standing traditions in the United States. After World War I, many women found themselves in a society that was transforming faster than it ever had been before. Cities were expanding, new technologies were reshaping daily life, and modern ideas of women gaining freedom and identity were gaining momentum. Yet, a great majority of Americans and the population of the world still clung to traditional values and expectations that women should remain modest housewives and devoted mothers to their children, creating a heavy tension between the past and the present. While traditional expectations still made women to be modest housewives and mothers, the rapid modernization of the 1920s introduced new job opportunities, personal freedoms, and access to health care that directly conflicted with these older ideals. This clash between long-standing social norms and emerging modern values reveals how the decade's changes actively pushed women toward altering their roles, setting the foundation for the rights and independence women have today.
Throughout most of American history, women were confined to a certain set of roles. Women were known to be housewives, settling down into becoming mothers, and dressing conservatively. All of this being due to the social and cultural structure of the world, and which could be viewed as misogynistic by today's standards. However, the 1920s was a time of change, especially for women, and they learned just how to start redefining their roles. One significant way that modernization was shown in the 1920s was the push for women to redefine their roles in the social and political aspects of their lives. A political cartoon by E.W. Gouston titled Election Day illustrates a woman confidently leaving the house to vote while her husband stays behind to take care of the children. This illustrates how the traditional dynamic of women being housewives was visibly evolving. This primary source shows how society was beginning to recognize and critique the reshaping of gender expectations as women exercised their new rights. This interpretation also highlights that women's political participation was not only symbolic, but a fundamental cultural shift with real consequences. In addition to this, modernization opened a plethora of new social, economic, and educational opportunities that started the movement of women stepping into public life. In this secondary source, historian Sarah Pruitt writes, "Flappers in the 1920s redefined womanhood by challenging beliefs and expectations of how women should behave." Pruitt explains how flappers used their fashion, public visibility, and social behavior to challenge the deeply rooted stereotypes surrounding women's modesty and sexuality. She notes that flappers' willingness to assert themselves in public spaces, whether by dancing in nightclubs, cutting their hair short, or by embracing their newfound political and social freedoms, this willingness symbolized a movement toward modern womanhood. Through this shift, Pruitt argues that the flappers became a more powerful representation of how rapidly changing values in this decade pushed women away from that traditional role and toward a greater autonomy.
Another one of the significant freedoms women gained during the 1920s was in the workforce. Most women were limited to being servants, factory workers, teachers, and seamstresses up until the 1920s. The work opportunities dramatically expanded in the 1920s, with the most popular new jobs for women being nurses, midwives, chefs, and accountants. A primary source from the Milwaukee Area Technical College Library is called Women in Nursing Classes 1920s, describes one of the new opportunities available to women. In the photo, you can see several women sitting in a classroom learning about what it takes to become a nurse. This shows the new ideas for women because before the 1920s, women would not have had the opportunity to take the nursing class, let alone become a nurse. Women were not only able to obtain jobs, but were also able to get some of the better jobs that existed in the 1920s. Research shows that out of the 8,000 women employed, 52.8% were employed in the top 10 occupations. This shows the difference that the 1920s made by allowing a rising amount of women to not just get jobs, but get the jobs that they actually dreamed of. However, the tension of male supremacy still stood. When women were starting to get these jobs, corporations created pay gaps to keep men superior from the women. This included entry-level positions such as factory workers. According to Propel HR, in factories, male workers in 1920 started at 40 cents per hour, while women started at 25 cents. The average weekly wage for men was $29.35, and for a woman it was $17.34. This demonstrates the tension between the traditionalist ways and the modern ideas, because even though women were able to obtain jobs, many people were still trying to hold them back. The pay gaps gave women significantly less amounts of money for the same amount of work, showing that these were big steps for women, but they still had a long way to reach full equality.
Now, one of the more interesting freedoms we saw for women was their change in reproductive health rights. During the early 1900s, women did not have access to things such as birth control until they became much more widely known. Margaret Sanger was one of the most influential voices, and in her book, The Case for Birth Control, she wrote, "She now steps forth and demands that women shall cease to reproduce in ignorance. To do this, she must have knowledge to control birth. This is the first immediate step she can make towards her goal of her freedom." Sanger's influence was able to open several clinics and give women the freedom she discussed in her book. Sanger was also able to help American women stay away from the idea of housewives and persistent motherhood they once knew. This again caused tension, since traditionally it's believed they should stay in their known role of mothers, as much so that there were laws that became present. Anthony Comstock was one of the biggest leaders of the anti-birth control movements, as he would make anti-birth control statutes and supply the police with information. According to PBS, in 1872, Comstock set off for Washington with an anti-obscenity bill, including a ban on contraceptives that he had drafted himself. On March 3, 1873, Congress passed the new law, later known as the Comstock Act. This statute defined contraceptives as obscene and illicit, making it a federal offense to disseminate birth control through the mail or across state lines. But it was not just Comstock, as in fact a major group of people thought just like him, which making the opening of birth control to be quite hard. However, most of the people today have grown to accept birth control in almost all of its forms for women today. Before, women were not supposed to have a choice at all, but the biggest issue seen today is about the right to choose. Many Americans have been fighting over the legal rights on abortions, which can be seen very similar to birth control, as both prevent childbirth. Women still have to keep fighting for this right, though, since 12 states have a full abortion ban law intact. So when looking between the past and the present, it's very clear that women are still fighting for all their rights, even though many inequalities were eliminated.
The transformations that women experienced in the 1920s continue to influence the modern society we live in today, further revealing how the decade laid out the groundwork for the freedoms and roles women hold now. With the rise of flappers, who challenge the strict expectations with their appearance and behavior, connects directly to the way that women today express themselves through fashion, lifestyle, and personal choices. In addition, women's political involvement during and after the 1920s set the stage for very high levels of civic participation seen today, including women voting at high rates, running for office, as well as shaping political debates. These minor developments show that the empowerment of women fought for during the 1920s has evolved into an expectation that women can lead, speak out, and influence their communities. By comparing the struggles and breakthroughs of women during the 1920s with those of today, it becomes clear that the social and political shifts of the decade were not isolated changes, but in fact stepping stones toward the continued expansion of women's freedom and equality today. The rise of flappers and the expansion of women's political rights in the 1920s together demonstrate how deeply this decade disrupted the long-held expectations for women's roles. Flappers defied traditional standards through fashion choices and behavior, while the newfound ability to vote allowed women to participate in shaping the nation's future, an opportunity that directly challenged the traditional beliefs about women solely belonging in the home. These cultural and political shifts signaled that women were no longer willing to be confined by gender norms, while traditional expectations still made women to be modest housewives and mothers. The rapid modernization of the 1920s introduced new job opportunities, personal freedoms, and access to healthcare that directly conflicted with the older ideals. The clash between long-standing normalities and emerging modern values reveals how the decades' changes actively pushed women toward altering their roles, setting the foundation for rights and independence women have today. In this way, the transformations of the 1920s were not temporary trends, but pivotal steps that would redefine womanhood for all future generations.